There are a bunch of books out there that are very popular that I had a huge problem with. I did a quick search and found that most people don't actually agree with me. And I thought, you know what the internet needs more of? Negative reviews. So, without further ado, here are my hot takes. Yeah. First, outliers. Malcolm Gladwell is a very popular journalist, not an academic. In Outliers, he argues that successful people are successful because a bunch of nonsense outside of their control. For example, children born in the first third of the year are more successful than others. But he goes about proving his theory backward. He looks at select hockey players and what time of year they were born, then asserts that because they were born early in that year, they were predetermined for greatness. And the rest of us born in the fall can never catch up. The most introductory of social science classes will reiterate that correlation does not equal causation. His theory is based on the timing of the school year. Someone born in January and September will be in the same class and will compete to be the star of the same sports team. But the kid born in January is 9 months older, so he has the advantage. Okay, fine. It's an interesting theory among drunk friends, but it's completely anecdotal, looks at an oddly narrow sample set, and excludes anyone who disproves his theory. Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg both have single-syllable first names. Therefore, other people with one-syllable first names will be destined for greatness. I take it back. My drunk friends are more interesting. I read this book when it first came out in 2008, and I still have a very visceral hatred for it. Another assertion he makes is that Asians are good at math because their ancestors were rice farmers. They come from a patient, hardworking people. I found myself mentally yelling at the author the whole way through. It was exhausting. Outliers. 20 years later, you can still evoke a hot rage that can fry an egg. I hereby banish you to the innermost circle of hell, which is reserved for betrayers and this book. Silmarillion. Boring. Trigger warning that there's going to be some upcoming discussion of sexual assault, so if you find that troubling, please feel free to skip ahead to this marker. I read 1Q84 because it is a critically acclaimed science fiction novel. It has alternate universes and different timelines, and I'm such a sucker for both, but I was wrong. It isn't science fiction. The true genre is creepy pseudo-pedophilia. The thing is that the book had the potential to be good, and I can see why people like it. The thing is, the science fiction elements are completely undercut by the way he describes the physical characteristics of his female characters and how obsessed with sex he makes them. He also lingers way too long on sex scenes. There is more gratuitous sex than in Game of Thrones. If you'd watched any bad 80s movies where for absolutely no reason women are running around half naked, it's kind of like that, but in book form. It was actually more painful to get through because it takes longer to read the written descriptions. Let me show you what I mean. He introduces the main female character, Almame, as she is climbing down a stairwell to an alternate reality. And then we take a sharp detour from the plot, as Almame daydreams extensively and quite graphically about a sexual experience she had with her best friend. This never comes up again and has no bearing on the plot. Was it necessary? Was it necessary to write in pornographic detail how they touched each other? How does that help us understand her character? Spoiler alert, it doesn't. We are also introduced to her by describing her young, exquisite body, and her breasts are mentioned consistently throughout the book. Might I also add that she is an assassin, physical trainer, and the best massage therapist of all time? It feels like the fantasy of a horny teenager, which is to say I would think that a professional writer could do a better job. There's another female character, Fuka Eri. Needless to say, she is very beautiful with very large breasts, even though she is quite slim. Oh, and did I mention that she's 17? Because she's 17. She's basically a senior in high school. She can't legally buy cigarettes yet. Not to put too fine a point on it, but she's a minor. Anyway, she has a great idea for a science fiction story, but she's a poor writer, so our male protagonist has to write it. And what do you know? Fukaeri and Tango, our male protagonist, have sex. Tango, who is an adult male, is overpowered by her breasts.
And he's like, Lord, show me how to say no to this. I don't know how to say no to this. I said, say no to what? She didn't ask you anything.
And then he thinks, it seems inconceivable his penis could penetrate her small, newly formed vagina. Newly formed. I don't know why there aren't more feminist critiques of this book, or why there aren't a million YouTube reaction videos remarking at the truly cringeworthy text. For those of you who read this book, you might think, wait.
Our mama specifically kills men who beat their wives.
Yes, she does kill those men. She also seems to sort of change her mind a little about the rapist that she kills. She starts to feel sorry for him. And let me remind you that the book points out that the rape is so brutal that it literally breaks a 10-year-old's uterus. The cult-like plotline is dropped, which is kind of too bad because I love a good cult. And we have some science fiction paradoxes that are never really explained, but neither one of those issues comes close to how creepily the women are sexualized. My issue isn't that there is sex, it's that it's so unbelievably creepy and weird. The book is very clearly a male-centric sexual fantasy. I'm really surprised that my perspective isn't more widespread in the United States. Granted, the book was published in like 2011, and the Me Too revolution that draws attention to the way that women are treated wasn't widespread until a couple of years ago. I'm still surprised that such a famous and popular book didn't receive more backlash. We all agree now that J.K. Rowling is problematic. Why do we have such a hard time labeling a book as problematic? I did find an interview with the author online, and the interviewer says the women, when faced with a heterosexual protagonist, have basically no choice but to play the role of a sexual partner. Looking at it from a certain angle, I think plenty of readers would argue that women are forever in this situation, forced into an overly sexual role simply because they're women. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that." End quote. And his thoughts, by the way, are unsatisfying. He doesn't seem to understand at first and then agrees, saying that none of his characters are particularly complex. I don't think an exchange between two people has been more frustrating than the 2016 debates. Disclaimer here that the author does come from a different culture with different perspectives and different societal norms. But all I can do is respond from my perspective. And my perspective as an American is ew, gross. Name of the Wind. My biggest problem with this book is that there isn't more. Pride and Prejudice. This book is often touted as the ultimate romance novel, with Mr. Darcy as the perfect partner to this intelligent, outspoken Elizabeth Bennet. And I think contemporary retellings do a really good job of capturing that story. I really enjoyed the movie adaptation, but the book... A quick recap. At first, she spurns his advances, and they fall in love and live happily ever after. Perfectly acceptable storyline overall. My primary problem with the book is that I don't think the romance is justified. Elizabeth finds him annoying for a majority of the book, only to fall head over heels in love with him after seeing his gigantic estate. Huh? I can tell that I'm supposed to think that this is true love, but I just don't see it. I don't see a gradual progression of a relationship. I see 0 to 60 admiration in just one scene. What it feels like is that she didn't fall in love with him, but his stuff. It reminds me of The Little Mermaid when Ariel falls in love with Prince Eric. And at the time when I was a kid, I was like,
she should definitely mutilate her body, abandon her friends. For a boy she's never spoken to, because it was love.
We took it on faith that we should be rooting for this romantic relationship without any real justification. And we were kids.
Whatever.
We were very easily manipulated. But for a book as popular and highly regarded as Pride and Prejudice, I had higher expectations. I could temper my anti-romantic reading by pointing out that I did read the book on my own in high school. But no, this is the internet, and there is no room for nuance. So I must unilaterally declare Pride and Prejudice as the most overrated book of all time. So I'll wait here while you write a comment telling me that you agree. I'll wait. Now that I know that you have the same taste in books as I do, let me recommend some alternatives. The Magicians is frequently described as Harry Potter for adults, which is actually pretty accurate. The Mountain Story is a beautiful story of survival that I cannot recommend enough to anyone who has a soul. You're Never Weird on the Internet by Felicia Day is a quirky memoir that's worth a read even if you've never heard and don't care who Felicia Day is. There are a few chapters that are surprisingly moving. And that's it, my recommendations and my anti-recommendations. Happy reading!